Okay, so welcome to everybody. As you can see, Mila is not with us today, so I'll be taking you through what we're going to be learning. And last week, we gave everybody homework to do, which was to do a mind map of the first 8 paragraphs. And we asked that people would put it onto the WhatsApp group. So we got 2 people who put it on the WhatsApp group. So I just want to get an idea from you if anybody else did the mind map. Please, you can write in the chat to say whether you did it or you didn't do it. And I'll tell you, the reason that we want you to do this mind map is not just because it's a nice idea, but we're getting to halfway through this chapter for the second time. And really, if you don't have a grip, if you don't really know the first half of this chapter, then you're not going to be able to understand the second half. The first half creates a foundation on which the second half builds. So in order to, for you to have a good grasp on what's been going on so far, we really want you to do this mind map, because it doesn't matter what the mind map looks like. It's the process of doing it, of going back and remembering and creating a short version so that you can just look back and glance and you'll remember what it is that we've been learning. Okay, so I've only got one person on the chat who's responded to me. So please, Shosh, did you do it? Or can you write on the chat? Tell me. Ilana, Nechama, Alkalea. I really want to know. I'm going to pause the recording because I really want to know what's going on. So what I will tell you is that if you didn't do it this last week, please do it the coming week. I'm going to share in this class a mind map that was done by Miriam, and Miriam gave me permission to share it. Okay, so okay, so Nechama, do you mind if I read to you what everybody says? Because it's a shared experience. Nechama is saying, no good excuse. I thought about it and really wanted to do it, but just happened to be a master of procrastination. Okay, I can relate to that. And Shoshana is saying, I write a review for myself in notes, but it's not a map. Okay, so that's good, but I'm going to show you the map as well, and you'll see how maybe it will help you. But you're saying, I took Mila's mind map and studied it carefully. Okay, that's also good. But to do it yourself uses a different part of your brain. It's a different kind of effort that you put in. So I really want to encourage you to, for next week's class, to do the mind map. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share with you the mind map that was done by Miriam, and maybe this will give you kind of inspiration and also, help you to see how it can be an advantage. Okay, so here we have, okay, Shara Yichud, the Mittler Rebbe, chapter 1, Reb Hillel of Parich. And over here on the left, Miriam created like a color code. So in the green is a statement, in the kind of red is a question, and the pink is an answer or an example. Okay, so we start off with, so I'm just going to run through it quickly, and you can see, look, isn't this amazing? So you start off with Shema Yisrael. And then on the side, she puts the detail of it. So that down the middle, what you're doing is you're getting the spine of what's important. And then on the sides, you're getting like the secondary things. So here there's Shema Yisrael, and on the side she writes Halacha 1, foundational or foundations and pillar of all wisdom, to know that there's God and he makes all of existence. And Halacha 7 is that God is one. Okay, now we go back to this central idea. Shema equals understanding, not just physical, but spiritual power of the soul, the inner ear to hear. And then on the side, she puts in kind of pink and red, which is questions. We need to understand what is hisbonenus, why does it have a double nun, and why bina and not chokhmah. Okay, going back to the center. So there are three parts of the mind. There's chokhmah, bina, and dat. Chokhmah is, and she's chosen here to put it in Hebrew, haskalas etzem ha'inyan, bilti hislapshus ba'osios. And then bina is havanas etzem ha'inyan bis hitlapshus ba'otiot. Okay, so that's an interesting thing to put it in the Hebrew, because in some ways the Hebrew is clearer than if you have to start writing this in English. But we understand that chokhmah is the essence of the idea, but it's not in the level of letters, whereas bina is the understanding of the essence of the idea, and that it's enclosed in letters. The explanations are in the form of letters. And to the left here, she put something that reminds her in World of Asiya. Okay. I'm not sure there. Okay. So now we go down. Oh, on the right here, so there was the mashal of, when we were talking about Chokhmah and Bina, there was the mashal of the beautiful building. She did a little drawing. And mashal 2 was the Talmudic discussion of eggs and halakha and Yom Tov. So it's like just to remind you, I remember, okay, the main idea was to understand Chokhmah and Bina, and the mashalim there were 2 mashalim. Okay, so we're going back to the main spine. So we looked at Chokhmah and Bina, and what is das? Das is hiskashus. It's connection, bilvad, only. And on the left here, she puts the 3 ways that we can know if somebody has das. You become fully focused and you don't think of other things. You forget about yourself and you forget about time. Coming back to the main skeleton here, das is rooted in chosh, which is the connection to the ratzon. When you're in the process of wanting, that's chosh. And the example here on the right side in the pink is the chazdan, somebody who is naturally kind. His ratzon, his desire is always to do good and is looking for chesed, opportunities, what to do and how to do them. And she did a little drawing here of 2 people, which is really cute. Okay. So then the depth or omek of the hiskashrut to the essence of the concept is dependent on the depth of the desire. So das depends on chosh. All right. So now that's like right there. Look at that. It's a great reminder. You just look at it. It's like a picture. Look, everybody can do it differently. There's not only one way to do it, but I'm just showing you this because it works beautifully. And you know, it's an example, but the main thing is to inspire you to do it. Okay, so then we see that Chabad has 3 dimensions: Oimek, which is depth, Orach, which is length, and Rochav, which is width. And we're going to look at these 3 dimensions in Chochmah, Bina, and Das. Okay, so let me stop sharing there. Okay, I just want to get some feedback from you. So that's not all of, that's the first kind of 3 paragraphs. I want to get some feedback from you, how this resonates for you, this process, before I go on to the next one. Okay, so just give me some feedback.
So I just want to say that when I was not doing it, I did spend some time thinking about what I would do, and I had more of an idea of something that's more visual. Like this seemed like a different way of organizing the words of the text in an outline. I mean, so I don't know if there are different ways to do it, or we're just supposed to take the concepts as they were communicated in the text, or do you understand what I'm saying? And probably it was hard for me to do because I'm not an artist, and I was thinking of something more visual, like a picture.
Okay, that's the point, is that it's different for everybody. You know, this is the way that Miriam, it works for Miriam to do it like this. You need to find your own way to make it work. I'll show you. I'm not going to, I guess I won't go through everything else that Miriam, you know, like I wanted you to just get the flow, but here's something else that Miriam did, because she is an artist, so she did something more visual. Let me just try and share this. And I'm not going to go into it in detail. Wait a minute. But here she took the something which was that you can't see. It's difficult to see, but she did something which was more of a drawing, which she understood, you know, which speaks to her. I don't necessarily know the details of it, where it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no one way to do it. It really depends on what's going to work for you. And also, it's the process of trying to figure it out is really that's really useful. I'll show you. Let me see if I can find. So Getty also shared her process, and I'll show you what Getty did, which is slightly different. It's more there's more Hebrew, so you know, that's what works for Getty, is to write this in Hebrew, which is great. And this is how Getty wrote it up. So for example, she sees there, okay, Shema, and she's just putting lines. And this is going to be her way of being able to look at something and see it and remember it. It's like creating triggers in your mind so that you're not trying to keep all of this information in your head, because it is a lot of details. So you're also trying to see what is ikar, what is the main point, and what is the secondary point. Because, you know, as we learned, one of the things that happens is that we can understand all of the details, but we can sometimes lose the point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also, this part of this process is to try and see what was the point and separate that out from the examples, because the examples are there for you to understand the point. But so somebody might want to do, you know, like a mind map without the examples. But the examples are also there to, you want to separate them out. That's why there's like the main skeleton and then the side things, which are the examples, the questions. And so it's really sorting this out in your brain, which is part of the year. It's part of the effort of trying to learn this, trying to sort it out, trying to figure it out. This is the process of Iyun. And putting it down onto paper is part of this process. And on top of that, like I said, it's really important to remember to have access to the information going forward. So I think, I don't know, have you ever spoken to somebody who has dementia that, you'll say to them, or, like an older person who's losing their memory. So you'll be in the conversation with them, and then they'll keep repeating the same thing because they don't remember that they said it. Or they'll ask you a question and you'll answer it, and 5 minutes later they'll ask you the same question. So, here we have a chapter of 19 paragraphs, which is like 19 ideas. And if by the middle of the, like after 8 paragraphs, you start to forget what was in paragraph 1 and 2 and 3, it's kind of like having a conversation with somebody who has dementia, that we've been through. Okay, we've learned that. Yeah, but okay, it's hard to remember it. So that's what this mind map is about. I almost think of it like, Tzipi, you speaking to us?
Lehavdil, I don't think that's it's necessary to go like that.
You're saying that you don't like my example?
No, I don't.
Okay. Can you give me a better example?
I think it's like itamlut. It's exercising the mind and getting. I had somebody at the Shabbos table, Shluchim, was talking. I don't remember the book. He was saying Walking with Einstein, and one of the there were targilim that was using to memorize. They were actually envisioning people going through different rooms, and each room had an idea, and they're actually envisioning themselves going from room to room, and as the process, and each room had the idea, and as they were walking to the next room, it was developing to next, and using different exercises to help remembering. And I think this is something that needs to be taught. That's why I said it's lahavdil. It's not. Also, it was very interesting. The example he was using, the first thing when he was using that example was very interesting, because the flashback that I had was the house. Do you remember when we were talking about you pass by a house and you see it beautifully, and yet you have to go to Bina in order to get all the details? So
yes.
it kind of the example they were using, I have to get the name of the book, but it's actual techniques of how to help a person memorize. And these were people who will take a deck of cards and memorize it. And he was showing how what kind of techniques they use to memorize. And so it's an Indian, whether I think it's very much needs to be taught like anything else. And that's why I said lahavdil. It has nothing to do, with what you meant.
I was using it as a mashal, just to almost to shock you into understanding that if you don't remember what we've learned, then the second part of this chapter just, you can't you don't have the foundation to build on it. Like you have to understand Chochmah, Bina, and Das in the way that he's explained it in order to go to the next level, which is the second part of the chapter, which is much more complex in a way. When you go into more details, like we have to know that. So Tzipi, it's really interesting for us to know, how do we remember things? Yoni, you were holding up a book that perhaps you were suggesting that that's the book. Can you tell us what it is?
It's called Moonwalking with Einstein.
Oh, and it's about learning how to remember.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's called Building Mind Castles. And you have rooms for each thing, so that as you walk through the room in your mind, you've placed each thing in a spot, so that as you walk through, you remember it.
Okay, so that's just knowing that is gives you an idea of how to do a mind map. That you can build a mind map like a house. You know, this is your foundation, or, you know, however it is. And then you can use that as a way of remembering. But however you want to draw the mind map, it's important to do it. To do something that is not just words, but words, you know, that's somehow organized in a way that you can look at it visually and have an easy way to remember what we've done up until now. So essentially what we've done up until now is that we've learned about, actually, we learned about, you know, he started off, and this is an important thing. When I was rethinking, because I went and also did a mind map, even though I've done mind maps of every chapter, now I thought, okay, I've asked you to do this, I must also try to do it. And when I was thinking about the first paragraph, he's really giving us motivation, why we should be learning this. And I understood that the motivation that he's saying is the goal. What is the goal of this whole chapter? And really the goal of Shara Yechud is to know Hashem. And that's why he brings those two, you know, the Rambam and the two halachas of getting to know Hashem. And so that is our motivating force. Now we have to go through a long process in order to know Hashem. Okay. And he starts off by teaching us about Chochmah and Bina and Das in quite a basic way. With Chochmah and Bina being, Chochmah is the essence of the concept. For example, like when I see a house and I see the beauty and I sense it. And then the Bina is my ability to take that experience of sensing and put it into words and explanations and share that beauty with someone else. And then the Das is the hiskashrus, etc., etc. And look, I do think that perhaps at the beginning of every class, I should really be going over this with you so that it also becomes something that is entrained into what we remember. So, but first of all, in order to do that, in order for me not just to be the only one who's going through those rooms, you have to have gone through those rooms too, so that when we do this at the beginning of the class, it will be making sense to you and you won't just be spacing out. Do you hear what I'm saying? Okay. So what we're going to do, we went through the three levels of Chochmah, the Oimek, Rachav, and Orech of Chochmah, and we looked at the mashal of the underground wellspring coming up into the revealed spring, and that was the mashal for Chochmah. And then we looked at Bina, which is the mashal for Bina was the river, and we looked at the Oimek, the Rochav, and the Orech of Bina. And today what we're going to look at is we're going to look at Das and the 3 levels of Das. So I want to first of all go back and see, what do we know about Das? Because it's really interesting if you think about it, like Sipi is suggesting or Einstein is suggesting, you know, we've already been into the room called Das. So before we go forward into the details of Das, let's try and remember what do we know about Das. So there are 2 ways we can remind ourselves. The one is that we go back and have a look at the mind map. So let's take a look at the mind map here. Okay, what do we know about Das? Oh, here's Das. So far, this is what we've learned about Das. Do you remember this? Das is not conceptualization. It's not, it's not the process of the brain like Chochmah, and it's not understanding like Bina. Das is just hiskashrus, bilvad. Hiskashrus means bonding or connection. And we remember like there were 3 ways we could know. And just think about this, like when you really connected deeply to something, what happens? You fully focused on it and you don't think about anything else. If you really, really focused on it, you kind of forget about yourself. You don't need to eat or drink or go to the bathroom. You forget about everything. Everything disappears. And also you forget about time. Like you can really spend a lot of time on something. And you also know when you don't have Das in something, you're getting up and going to look in the fridge and, looking at your phone and answering texts and then going back. And, they're very obvious when you don't have Das into something, when you're not connected to what you're doing. So that was the explanation of Das. And then he went and Reb Hillel went and explained, and there was the example, Miriam didn't put it here, but there was the example of the 2 students, the one who was very connected to what they were learning, and the other one who was not connected. And then he came up with these 3 indicators. And then the question was kind of like, well, why is one person connected to something and the other person is not? So Reb Hillel described to us something which he didn't do with Chochmah and Bina, which is he explained that the root of Das, like where does Das come from, is something called chush. And the chush is really our connection to our ratzon, to our desire at the time that we want it. So the Das, the level of our connection to whatever it is that we're focusing on is dependent on the strength of our chush, which means the strength of our desire for that thing. Okay. So now there we are. That's what's in the room of Das. Now we're going to add something else to our room of Das. First of all, I just want to get some feedback. Did you remember that? That resonates, right? We go back. In a way, what we're starting to do, the way that I feel is that instead of this being like, a line, that you're learning this and then this and then this and this, it starts to become more 3-dimensional because you have some knowledge about Das, and now you're going back to it and building on that knowledge. So you're really building your your das. All right. Okay. So
Can I ask a question?
yes, you can.
Yeah.
I just want to read here. Miriam says, I still don't understand fully the two students' discussion and why, etc. Okay. Let's hold that question. Nechama, you have a question?
So if das originates in Chush, then what's the relationship of Chochmah and Bina to Chush? Do they also get something from that? Because it seems like the Chush is the source of energy for all of it.
Right. So really it's a good question, and you're going to see where the das is like the glue. We said that the das is the hiskashrus, but if you look in the text, it's the hiskashrus to what? To Chochmah and Bina, and to Koach HaMaskil and Chochmah. Like it's the thing that connects everything. So the das is going to be connected to the Ratzon, and it's going to activate the Chochmah and Bina. So yes, they're impacted by the Chush, but it's the das that is the activator.
So is it all happening at once? Because I mean, I had visualized Chochmah and Bina, and then comes das, but as the sort of the integration of both of them. But is it all happening different time?
Look, it's kind of like if you imagine the anatomy of a body, and you're having to teach somebody who's never seen a body. So you have to isolate the different parts, and then only later talk about how they work together. Now, the fact that I'm speaking, my brain is working, my hands are even moving, all kinds of things are happening simultaneously. But if I have to explain to you how a body works, and that the brain tells the hand to move, and that the nervous system works this way, and the endocrine system works this way, but it's all working together. Yeah, it's instantaneous, but we have to learn it. The nature of learning is that you have to learn it sequentially. So what he does is he teaches it to us in a sequence, and then he puts it all together, like shows us how it works in one shot. So yeah, it's very hard to isolate, he's doing a great job to isolate the different parts, but it happens very quickly, one would imagine. Does that answer your question, Nechama?
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, so Miriam, you still don't understand the student. I think it's, in a way, it's a big mystery, and in a way, it's quite simple. If you think for yourself, Miriam, how you get connected to doing, to studying something, or to maybe, in your painting, that you lose yourself in what you're doing, that you get very connected to it, as opposed to something that you're not so interested in. Like, I'll give you an example for myself. I really don't like cooking, but I have to do it. So I don't have a deep desire for it. And I don't understand people who do, but I have a friend who's Moroccan. She loves being in the kitchen. For her, it's a deep meditation. For me, I have to put on my headphones and listen to a shiur while I'm cooking, so that, because I'm just not connected to it. Is that a good example? Yeah, I think so, in some way. To find for yourself, I'm going to ask you to find for yourself examples of the Oimek, Rochav, and Orach. So I think maybe then you'll understand it. You can also look at your kids and see how one child is very connected to a certain kind of activity and the other is not. I'm looking at our grandchildren here. and one of them, she has what I call, there's not just IQ, there's emotional intelligence, there's physical intelligence. So the one grandchild has very good intellectual intelligence, and she can go on for hours telling us the story, the details of the story of the parsha, and it's beautiful. And the other grandchild is very good with her body. She loves to dance, and so she was giving me a dancing lesson and kept saying, Naria, move your body. Why are you not moving your body? Like, really get into it. And for the one who has the physical intelligence, she's not so interested in all the details of the parsha. And the one who's into the details of the parsha, it's very difficult for her to, really move her body. She's quite a little bit awkward. So we all have different, chushim, really. And as Miriam is writing here, the chush is the key. But what we do have, we all have, and Mila likes to say this, we all have a chush for knowing Hashem. As a Jew, we are given that. And now we have to find our particular way of doing that. Okay, so let's move on. And I'm going to work with the English for today. Okay, so now this is paragraph 9, and this is the summary that I created. So he starts off, Reb Hillel starts off with a definition of das. To take us, isn't it beautiful? He's taking us back into the room of das, and he's overlapping, he's reminding us what is das. And he also deepens our definition in quite a beautiful way. So he says, okay, maybe I'll get somebody else to read. Who would like to read? Nechama, would you like to read? Nechama?
I could.
Okay.
So the definition of das?
Mm-hmm.
Das means to focus the power of one's mind and thought on one particular concept. As the Baal Shem Tov says, wherever one's thoughts are, that is where one is fully invested. Through das, the person connects the entire essence of his being to the concept he is thinking about.
Okay, so let's just stop there and just think for a moment, because it's quite, you can just say, okay, nice, and move on. But if you just stop for a moment and think what the Baal Shem Tov is saying, wherever one's thoughts are, that is where you are fully invested. You're enclosed in those thoughts. And this is the explanation of it. Through das, the person connects the entire essence of his being. And the term there is kol atzmut nafsho, like the whole essence of his nefesh, which is like his being, into what you're thinking about. Now, I want you to just close your eyes and think for a moment what you think about during, on a regular basis. And what does that mean to you that you are investing yourself, you're enclothing yourself in your thoughts? And I just want you to think about that for a short while and see what comes up for you. Okay. I want to just get a little bit feedback from you. Like, how does that resonate for you? And what does that mean that what you are thinking about is then it's in your body, it's in your nefesh? Anybody?
Yeah. For me, it brings tremendous fear because it's the responsibilities that weighs with it. What I'm connecting, what is the vibration that I'm bringing into the world. And it's a tremendous responsibility.
Okay. Does it have to come with fear? Because the fear itself then becomes what you are connecting to.
It's fear more of, it's fear of like, if I'm not in the right place, I need to redirect it. It's like, don't go there. Like, that, don't think like that. If it's good, when my mind is in the right place, it's like almost I'm seeing miracles all over the place when I'm actually thinking and constantly that kind of, when I'm in that state of mind and constantly, it's wow.
Yeah.
And when it's like, when it's not that, and I'm being petty about Tusim, and it's just like, it's like, don't go there. Like, why would you be thinking like this? You know?
Right. Okay, thanks, Sippy. Shosh, I want some feedback from you.
I don't think I went into a proper example. I went into reflecting deeply on, like, working on healing experiences and the whole process of that, of other people. And it was very, because when I did DOS connection, it pulled me right into when I'm super connected to other souls and really to see pictures and it all unfolds. And it's a total Iskashos experience for me. But I don't know if I'm going through an intellectual process. It's just more an experiential, total connection.
Okay. Okay, good. Anybody else would like to share? Yoni?
Okay, so I've been sick for like the last 10 days pretty much. And it's like, because I had mono, like 30 years ago, and then I eventually healed from it, but every now and then it gets activated. And it seemed like it either got activated or my immune system was down. And every time that I started getting better, and I had a lot going on in the week, that very stressful stuff, and I just kept on getting sick again. And then I would like, if I would go out of myself or go to the shops or interact with people, I would start feeling well again. But then I would come home and go back into my head and get sick again. But there were lots of hectic things happening. But it was manifesting in my body, and I was very, very ill. Like, I had swollen glands and headaches and pain in my body. And
Are you connecting it to what you were thinking about?
yeah, it seemed like whenever I would like ruminate on something, I would start feeling sick again. But if I would go to work and work was going smoothly, then I would feel okay. As soon as work wasn't going smoothly, I would start feeling sick again. And it's also been very, very hot here. It's been around 36 degrees, and it's been like unbearably hot, especially yesterday. So yesterday I felt very ill, and I was so distressed by the weather that I got more and more sick as the day went on. So I don't know if that's...
But, well, what I hear you saying is that in some, this is really the feeling that I think certainly what came up for me is that the thought that I have is not just in my head, but it becomes like integrated into my body, almost like a shower of hormones or enzymes or whatever it is, but the idea travels through my body. It's not, that's the das. When we think about something, it impacts our entire nefesh. And when the nefesh means is in the blood, it's like traveling through our body. And it's a very powerful thing that he's saying. He's saying, this experience, that's das. And when you think about something and you connected with it and you're concentrating on it with das, it's impacting your entire being. And as Sippy said, that's pretty awesome, for good and for the opposite, to the point that it can actually make you sick. And, certainly healing these days is looking very much at our thoughts, how much our thoughts impact our physical health and also impact the reality that we create for ourselves. And so this is, it's a very profound thing that the Baal Shem Tov is saying here, saying, wherever you are, that's you. You are your thought. That's das. It impacts your entire being. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, let's look at the omek of das. Nechama, do you want to continue?
Okay. The omek of das. There are many levels of connection. For example, a child, although they are connected with their concentration, their das, to something, they can be easily distracted to the opposite. However, an adult, because he's connected with the depth, omek, of his das to the thing he desires, the omek of das, where's it? That sentence didn't continue. Wait. The omek of das is the power of bittul that resides in the third brain, which is in the back of the head. Das reaches to the essence of the concept, lemahut etzem hadavar. Even chachma, which is haskalas etzem hadavar, is only an expression, hispashtus, from the essence of the thing. Through this bond, he affects a deep connection with the essence of what he desires and causes an awakening of the koach hamaskil to have insight into it.
Oh, okay. So Nechama, you're not reading from the screen, right? You're reading from...
I printed it out.
You printed it out. Okay, so you can see there's slight
Made
changes.
some changes.
I made a few changes. That's okay. It's basically very similar. Okay, so let's try and understand the omek of das. So he starts off with an example, but let's leave the example to the end. These are the definitions. The omek of das, we know that omek is always an ayin and it's bitul. These are the omek of everything is bitul and ayin. We know that. So the omek of das is the power of bitul that resides in the third brain, which is in the back of the head. So, we have, anatomically speaking, we have three brains: right brain, left brain, and kind of the middle brain. That's the das brain. It's at the back of the head between the other two. And this is something really interesting that he says here. Das connects to or reaches, it bonds with the essence of the concept, the actual essence of the concept. And before, he had said in earlier paragraph that chokhmah is the essence of the concept. But here he shows us that that wasn't exactly 100% true, because actually chokhmah is not the essence of the concept. It's the haskalat etzem hadavar, but it's actually an expression of the essence of the thing, because it's already manifest in the chokhmah brain. So it's already an hispashtus, an expression of it. So das reaches deeper than chokhmah even, which is quite a quite a shocking thing to say, that, you know, Das goes deeper than Chochmah. Okay, now here is something that somebody answers a question that was asked before. Through this bond of Das, he affects or creates a deep connection with the essence of what he desires. And this causes an awakening of the Koach HaMaskil to have insight into it. And in the text, he says, we're going to learn this later. And we will learn more details later, but he's just giving us a hint here that the Das is going to, which is connected to the Ratzon, which we know is Chosh, that's going to awaken the Koach HaMaskil to give information to the Chochmah and to the Bina. And Nechama, I think that was your question. So we're going to see how this works in detail later when we talk about Amakas Hadas and Maimek. But here he's just giving us a hint, just to put this bit of information into the room called Das. Okay, so now we know technically what Omek of Das is. But let's get an example. So an example is a child, although they are connected with their Das, their concentration to something, they can easily be distracted to the opposite. Okay, so I want you to think of so I'll give you an example of this, and then you'll think of examples. You know, if you take a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old and they're playing with a toy, somebody comes and wants to take that toy away from them, the kid will go berserk, right? Because they're really connected to that toy in that moment. But if you replace that toy that they have with another toy, and you take the first toy out of their sight, they will quite quickly forget about the first toy and get connected to the next one. Am I correct? Everybody relates to that? Yeah. Now, as the child grows older, that is harder to do. You know, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, they connected to something. Now you want to take it away from them, and give them something else. It's very difficult because their Das is stronger and they want what they want. They connected to that first object. So here we have, however, an adult cannot what? Cannot be easily distracted to the opposite, to something else. Why? Because he's connected with the depth of his Das to the thing that he desires. So I want you to just take a moment and find an example in your own experience where either, you know, you yourself have been connected very strongly to something, and now you have to let go of it. Okay, Nechama, you're asking, how is it then that so many adults can multitask? I think multitasking is something different. Here, multitask means you're doing many things at different times. Maybe it's, you know, you're connected to many different things. Here, we're talking about you connected to one thing, and now you have to disconnect from that and be, you know, have it substituted for something else. Not multitasking, but I'm trying to think of an example for myself. You know,
Shabbos.
Okay, Tzipi, yeah, what you saying?
Shabbos. I was just thinking when you were saying that, I was thinking of Shabbos. Thank God we have Shabbos to not allow all the things that we enjoy and love to kind of control us. And we let go of all the things that we enjoy, and we go into a different state of being on Shabbos, whether it's whether some people whether it's your cooking, whatever, or your phone or smoking, whatever. I mean, whatever that is, there's like, no, you let go of it. This is not what this, Ashreinu Matov Chalkeinu, that we have Shabbos.
Right. So,
Oh, go ahead.
Shosh, yeah. Go ahead, Shosh.
I just wanted to ask a question because the cooking stimulated a question. Is it true, Das, if you're doing something, like I also don't love to cook, but say I really, for instance, for my parents, Thanksgiving's a really big deal. So I put my whole soul into making, because it mattered so much to them, their turkey perfect and didn't make a turkey. And my whole essence went into it. It came out great, but do I really love it? Do I have a deep push to it? Well, in the moment, I put all my total focus in it for them. Is that true, Das? And
so it's interesting because we're going to look at it. You'll see that in a way that is connected to the Orech of Das, because there, as an adult, they give an example in the English translation, a beautiful example. And when we get to it, you'll understand it more, but I'll try to address it now. Like you don't like cooking, but what is your chush there? What's your ratzon? Is your love for your parents.
yes.
So that's a very adult thing, to be able to do something that is secondary, which is for you is the cooking, which you don't like, because of something that is primary, which is the love for your parents. That's a very sophisticated thing. A child cannot do that.
I see. So the DOS is with the love of the folks, and the byproduct is the turkey that comes out great because I tried my hardest to make it, to really put my soul into it. But it's not like I really had a love.
Right. And that's going to be the Orech of Das, that you're able to take something, to put it into a different keli, into a different vessel. You're able to, basically what you say, it's like a secondary ratzon.
Can I ask a second question? That was very helpful. Thank you. Do you mind, or is...
No, go ahead.
So in my first example, when you asked us to think about Das with something, and I gave the healing example, like I'm in a healing group. And so my experience is one of the strongest, I would think, examples of, or it feels like a tremendous connection in Das to when I'm, observing or working as someone. We just basically allow Shem to do the healing. But I was thinking, where is the whole process other than a ratzon for the soul or for their child, for what they need? It's just a general ratzon. And then, but my whole essence is there, with them at the time. But I couldn't stop and say, well, what's my chachma? What's my bina? Is that true, Das, too? I mean, it's very different than approaching, you're writing a song and you feel all the steps, so to speak. You see the difference, kind of? It's more like all my ratzon is helping someone, and that's it. And then you're there. Does that make sense? So it feels like it's not.
I'm sure also there's steps when you're thinking of healing. I'm sure there's many, many ideas that are coming into your head, whether it's what kind of minerals or vegetables. I'm talking about or massage. I'm sure your mind is racing with all sorts of ideas how to bring healing. The concentration.
No, not zero, because all we do is allow Hashem, to enter their field. All we're trying to do is make a space for them to just absorb, to just connect. That's all that, it's all God. So in a sense, really, it's the opposite. That we've seen that the highest healing comes in when we just sort of do nothing. It's just holding the space, and boom, things just shift. We've seen it. Someone needs pranasa, this happens, that happens. It's crazy. So we're really just trying to hold a space of God. I mean, we're not trying to do anything. We're just trying to help that field to clear, so Hashem. So it feels like this total immersion, Das experience, but because I'm sort of absent of what you're talking about, that's why I'm wondering, is this...
Okay, Sure,
Yeah.
I don't think that
This is not one.
it's an on. I think it's a beautiful question. But I
It
don't
sounds like
think
you're going
it has
to
an
the Olmec.
answer.
The Olmec, you're going to the nothingness, to the ayin.
Mm-hmm.
The
It's
source.
almost
You go
like
to the
you're
source.
staying in, you're just staying in that Omek of Das space where you make
Yes.
a connection and you're just holding the Omek. It's really something beautiful and interesting to think about. Usually, as Tsipi was originally saying, you know, in a more regular situation, you might start to like get inspiration about what could help the person, and then you would bring it down into Chochmah and Bina, and then share it with the person. But it sounds like, you know, the instructions you are giving is just to hold the space of not knowing and of just staying in the space of connection. And, you know, the moment we bring something down into Chochmah and Bina, so it becomes a yesh, and you're just staying in the space of ayin. And, you know, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting when I get flashes of seeing visions. That is I guess that is those things. If I see, oh, I think this happened at 13 or da, da, da. So when you get those flashes, then that is probably the other things coming down. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Right. Okay, great. So look, let's just keep it simple. I want you to think of an experience that you have that it's very difficult to distract you from. Something that you have das into. So Shosha has mentioned it, but I want everybody to just think of something, an experience where you're not distracted, not at all. And we've talked about this before because we already have this in our das room of the person who's totally connected. But let's just go back to that. This is the Omek of Das, is when I am not easily distracted. And just take a minute and think of a situation and feel it, of that experience of having das. And you can ask yourself, like, what is the motivation behind that activity that keeps you so locked onto it? Okay, let's just have a couple of sharings. I'll start. I sometimes do video editing and I have to keep in my head a lot of information because I take like an hour and a half of footage and I have to make it into like 5 minutes. So sometimes what I will do is I will work late at night so that I'm not distracted, and I'll work for like 6 hours straight and I barely get up. I'm just totally locked into what I'm doing because I have to hold so much information in my head. And when I think about it, like, what is the real motivation? I don't love video editing. I really don't. But unfortunately, I do it because the real motivation is the money that I get paid. So I'm motivated to get connected to it also through something secondary, like I spoke to Shosh about. Okay, let's hear from people quickly, just so I get an idea of, but it's an experience, a physical experience of this deep connection. If you want to write in the chat or just open up your mic and tell us. I just want to know that everybody has understands this experience. Sarah, I'm asking people who are on camera. Sarah, can you give us an example?
Yeah, I'm thinking about different realm completely. We know that marriage is knowledge, right? Is that, and I'm thinking that when a marriage falls apart, where there was a lot of that, so that's why it's so difficult for the adult to give up on it. Maybe that's why the Mizbeach also sheds tears. I was just taking it in that direction. I came in the middle. I missed a few classes. I was out of the country. So I don't know if I'm jumping into something that is completely off. But this is where my mind was taking me. I remember speaking with a friend who told me about another friend that was so connected to somebody, maybe she met, maybe I don't know what was, but there was a very, very deep connection there on her part. And she was not able to give it up, even though it interfered with her life. Maybe she was again married. I don't know the story details. But I'm just thinking that when one puts his dot into a relationship, that is a very, very strong thing. And that's an example where, you know, for an adult, it's extremely difficult to, you know, to substitute it like you do with a friend, with a child.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful. Because we know that the first place that we see this word das in the Torah is that Adam knew Chava, you know, that there is the bonding between a husband and wife that, as you say, to break that is devastating because of the das. All right. Thank you, Sarah.
I'd like to give another example. It's not, is it okay?
Yes.
Okay. It's not personal to me. It's a story also I heard. This is a Yemenite lady, and she said her living was being alive is a miracle, and what it was is her parents were leaving the whole mishpacha, like a whole town was leaving Yemen towards Eretz Yisrael about 58 years ago, and they were going through the desert. Her mom just gave birth to her. She was about a few months old, and from it's hard walking through a desert. Her mom's milk was not available. She said that her father and many of the townspeople were very knowledgeable of Kabbalah, and the whole way they sang Shir Hashirim, and they as they were walking, they were singing the Tehillim, and Shir Hashirim and Kol Minei Piyutim. And the only thing they were able to give her was water. And this is a tiny baby we're talking about. Until they got to the next town was another 2 weeks till they were able to get like proper milk. So all she drank was water. And a baby at that age is very precious. It's very, and she said they so connected with their singing and McCovenant that this should give her life. I guess, I don't know, I imagine the angels that were created, but she survived. And yeah, so that reminded me of the deep connection of what you were explaining.
Wow. Beautiful story. Amazing how the words of the songs and the words of Torah can give you life. Literally. Okay. Look, I just really want everybody to have a feeling of what das is, to feel it in your body, not just as a concept. Okay, so let's go on. So that's the oimek of das, is that very intense experience of connection that you're not going to be distracted. Now, what is the rochav of das? Okay, I'm going to ask Sarah Ginsberg, you want to read? Thanks, Nechama. We're going to move on. And Sarah, you're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. Rochav of das, a person is able to tolerate the opposite perspective. A child can be easily persuaded to accept the opposite view, but before he is persuaded, he cannot tolerate the opposite view. In contrast, an adult cannot be easily persuaded to the opposite view because of the depth of his knowledge, das, but for this reason, he can tolerate the opposite view, but remains unmoved from his position.
Okay, thank you. So, look, we need to think about this. First of all, we're talking about rochav. What does it mean a person is able to tolerate the opposite view? So if you think about, like, what's this got to do with rochav, with width? So if you think about, I'm on one side of, let's take politics because it's easy to understand. I'm on the right and somebody else is on the left. Like there's a wide, big difference between my perspective and the other person's perspective. Okay, Nechama writes broad-minded. Okay, nice. So now when we're talking about a child and an adult, we're not only talking about a literal child and a literal adult. Adults can be small-minded. And we can catch ourselves being small-minded. So what is this example? And I'm going to ask you to think of an example in your life, but let's just break it down. So a child, who doesn't have a lot of das, you can tell them something, and then somebody else can come along and tell them the opposite, and they'll change their mind because they don't know much about the situation. So let's take something controversial like Israel. Somebody who doesn't say, the average American, they don't know much about Israel. Or let's say, take something that's not so controversial for us, Ukraine. I don't know that much about the Ukraine. A Russian can come along and tell me, this is the reason why Russia invaded and why it's correct. And maybe I'll believe them because I don't know much about the situation. Then a Ukrainian will come along and tell me from their perspective why it's absolutely terrible and wrong that Russia should have invaded Ukraine. And because, my level of knowledge about that whole area is kind of like on the level, is small, like a child. So then I'll believe them. And then quite honestly, I don't know what to believe because both are, I can be persuaded to the opposite view because why? Because I don't have das into it. I don't have knowledge about it. But before I'm persuaded, okay, first of all, I hear from the Russian about how, the Ukraine used to be part of the USSR or whatever the reason is. And somebody will come and tell me the opposite. At first, I'll really stick up for it, because that's all I know. I just know that. And I won't be able to tolerate the opposite view and I'll shout the other person down. So there's a kind of contradiction in it. And the contradiction is because I don't really know. I don't have a position of my own. Now, in contrast, an adult, you can't persuade them easily to give up their perspective. Somebody who's very, very deeply rooted in what they know, you can come and tell them something else, and they'll be, you can say whatever you like. It's not going to change my opinion. But if they're really adults, they can sit and they can listen to the other person's perspective and they're not going to be moved. Now, I'll give you an example of this. I heard recently about a discussion. Now, I will get controversial, not so controversial for us, but, in Israel, there's a lot of controversy about, that the religious should or shouldn't go to the army, the Haredim, the very religious. There are a lot of religious people who do go to the army in Israel, but certain groups do not go. And so there was a rabbi, Rav Aaron Levi, who was on a panel with a lot of secular people who were discussing how to convince the religious people that they need to go to the army. And he sat and he listened to everybody's position. And then they said to him, okay, Rabbi, you talk. So he said, Rav Aaron Levi said, you're making a mistake here. You don't understand. I'm just going to stop sharing. You're trying to convince people to do something, but you don't understand them to begin with. You don't understand who you are dealing with. These are religious people who believe in the Torah. And so they have rabbis who connect them to the Torah, and they listen to the rabbis, because this is what these people were saying, that they just listen to the rabbis, and therefore it's a cult. He says, no, you don't understand. The rabbi is somebody who really understands the Torah and then tells the people what they should or shouldn't do based on what the Torah is saying. So Rav Aaron Levi was saying to them, you're not going to convince them or the rabbis to do something against Judaism. We've been doing this for 3,000 years. We've had a lot of opposition from a lot of people inside and outside of Judaism to go and do things that is going to, destroy Judaism. And we can listen to what you have to say, but you're not going to move people from their belief because they have das, because they really know what they believe. So for me, that's a good example. I mean, you have to understand the ins and outs of it, because you could say on the one hand, people should go to the army, but the Haredim are very concerned that really what they want to do is that the army will not facilitate them staying religious. And really what the secular people in Israel want is that the religious should disappear, and this is one of the ways that they can make this happen. So there are different ways to see it. So the rabbi was saying, you can come with any argument you like. Judaism is Judaism. You're not going to move people from their das, because they have das. They can listen to you, but they're not going to change their opinion. Okay, so is that clear? So I want you to think, once again, it's really important to personalize this, to find an example in your life where either you easily persuaded, or you hold your position. But think about it. It's not easy to have a discussion with somebody who has the opposite opinion and sit and listen to them. Really listen to them. Think about that. Somebody who thinks different from you, and you're able to really listen to them, hear what they have to say, listen, maybe there's some truth in what they have to say, and not be moved from your position. Or, if you hear that there's truth in it, that you can incorporate it into your belief system, like you hear that they're saying something that's correct based on your belief system. Nacham is asking, could das be any belief system? That's a good question. I think in general you could say, yes. But here, when we're talking about Torah, we're talking about Torah. Okay, so just take a minute and try, and I want you to find this rochav of das or the opposite, where you don't have roch of das, you can understand it both ways, which is a good thing to know. You can understand it from not having it, and you can understand it from having it. So just take a minute, think of a situation. Okay, can we have some examples? Alkalea, are you with us? You haven't been speaking. Or are you traveling? Let me see. No, that's Cody. Alkalea, do you want to speak to us? Ilana, Richmond, you've also been quiet. Oh, Alkalea, you can't speak. Okay. All right. Let's see. Batya, you have something? Yeah. Do you want to share with us?
Oh, I could speak. I could speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ilana. And then we'll go to Batya.
Okay, sorry. So I was thinking like sometimes my husband wants to eat vegetables that are actually too soft, in my opinion, because they're almost spoiled. And I want to throw them out. So I think this is an example of having rochav of dat, where I can understand his point of view, but I don't agree. I want to throw them out.
Okay,
Well,
good.
is that an example of rochav of dat?
Yeah, where you can listen to the other person. You don't change your mind because you're very connected to the fact that, you know, they're not, they don't have any nutrients left in them. But you can hold opposites in a way.
Yeah,
Okay,
right. Yes,
It's-
thank you.
it's good. It's nice to find it in the small details of life because it happens all the time. Okay, Batya, Basi, do you want to unmute yourself and give us an example? You're having problems?
Okay, you could hear me?
Yes.
I was thinking of the slight small tensions that occur in preparations for a chasana. And I think that most of us some of us have experienced this, that each side has very strong feelings about seemingly minor things, how much money to spend on flowers, and because the costs are in general, in total, are so big, one tends to get fixated on small amounts, on small, let's save money on this and not that. So I'm just bringing up that seems to me a situation where I can listen to the other side, but I have strong opinions about how I feel the money should be spent.
Okay, I can feel the tension.
I have a question on the other way, on the other side completely.
Okay. Thanks, Basi.
What, I'm sorry?
No, I just said thank you to Basi. Okay,
Okay.
Sarah, you can go ahead.
I have completely the other way. Sometimes we have a discussion about certain things, and I say my opinion, And let's say my friend or my husband or my sister or whoever it is would say another opinion. I would totally see what they're saying. And I say, I agree with you. And then another person would say their opinion. And I would say, I agree with you also. So how do you handle that? And it totally makes sense what she says, and it totally makes sense what he says, and it totally makes sense what I initially thought. So what is lacking over here?
It's an interesting question because on the one hand, like I was using the example of the Ukraine, where I don't have a strong opinion about it, or I'm not deeply connected to it, where somebody who's from Ukraine would be and would probably know a lot more. So my first question would be, is it something that you know very well or that you're deeply connected to? Say, for example, going to Basi's example, what's at stake there is money. You know, it's my entire nefesh is at stake here. And so I can hear that you want to spend, you know, $20,000 on flowers,
Liquor.
on whatever it is. Let's say flowers, because it's less controversial. Like, you really, really need flowers? Like, it really, you know, you're very, very connected to it. So now, if you think about that situation where everybody makes sense, on the one hand, I would say to you, like, do you really know the subject very well so that you're deeply connected to it and deeply connected to, like, you have a chush for it as well, like something you know very, very well. On the other hand, there is the rochav. So if you're not very connected to it, it could be because you could say that you have moach katan in a way on the subject. Like you're more like a child. You can be easily impacted. On the other hand, maybe that's not the truth. Maybe everybody has a different perspective. Like if you're talking about Torah, so you know there's 70 facets, and they could all add to your rochav. So it's difficult to say here if what that example is really referring to. Do you get what I'm saying? I think that's your question. So we don't, you know, it really depends on the situation. Okay, let's move on and let's see what is the orech of das. Okay, I'm going to read this one just because I want to make some comments. So the orech of das, what do we know about orech? Orech is always about drawing down something. We bring it down like the river that's far from its source. Okay, the ability, so the orech of das is the ability to draw down the object of your desire into many different kelim. Now, we had an example of that before. In our first das room, we spoke about the person who was naturally chesed, and that person was going to think about many different ways to do chesed, and also many reasons why chesed is the most important thing. Do you remember that? That was the example of das. So there he was actually describing the orech of das, but he wasn't telling us about it. So that's what it means to draw down the object of his desire, the thing that you really want, into many different things. So this is the example. An adult, when he longs for something or lusts for something, he's not satisfied with just a little. He wants it in many different ways. And with a child, it's not the case. Here, once again, try to think of an example in your life. Let's go on to hear what the Mittel Rebbe says, and then it'll give us more examples. On the verse, the humble will have increased joy in Hashem. It's talking about in the time of Mashiach, the humble, the people who are like Anava, will have increased joy in Hashem. And the Mittel Rebbe says, seems to me that what he's saying is that they're going to increase the many ways in which they have joy in Hashem. The Mitzvah Rebbe says on this verse, the many combinations of the letters of thought, speech, and action are the vessels, are the kelim for the essential attribute, which is the power of lust or longing, mitaver, which is rooted in das. So we're talking about the ratzon. So he's saying that when you have a deep ratzon, you have a das to your ratzon, your chush, you're deeply connected to what you want, you will think about it, you'll speak about it, you'll do it. So the example of the person who's naturally chesed, they're going to think of reasons why chesed is so important. They're going to think about all different kinds of chesed that they can do. And then they're actually going to do it. So the letters of thought, speech, and action are an example of kelim, that you draw down your desire into many different ways to manifest it. Okay. So in the English translation, they also mentioned something that I mentioned earlier in the class to Shoshana, that the orech of das can also be that you're able to draw down your desire into something secondary. So for example, I gave the example of myself doing the video. Now, I do the video because it's work, because I earn money from it. But I don't particularly like the work, but I'm connected more to the fact that it gives me parnasa. And that's also an example of orech of das. Like I'm able to have a thought, speech, and action that is connected to something that I don't like for something that I am connected to, or that I like a little bit, but my primary ratzon is not for the thing itself, but for something further removed from it. You see, that's the orech. You're able to take it further down. The das, you can connect the das not to the first thing, but to the second thing. That's the idea of orech. Do you get that? Because orech is, like we said, the example of the river, that it takes it further away. So here we're saying the das is the ability to connect to something that is further away from your original ratzon. Because say my ratzon is to have parnasa. So I'm able to do something that is uncomfortable in order to fulfill something that I really want. That's orech. That's another example of orech of das. It's far away from the original ratzon. Like with Shoshana, didn't really like cooking the turkey, but the original ratzon was to do it for her parents. So she was able to cook the turkey, not because she likes cooking turkey, but because she wants to please her parents. So a child can't do that. Somebody with moach katan can't do that. Like they can't be connected to something that is far removed from their ratzon and make that connection. That's orech, to be able to hold that connection. Am I clear? I think it's kind of clear to me. Let me know. Yoni, is it clear to you? Yes.
So I think so. Like I can give an example, because I was thinking I want Chassidus, and specifically Chabad Chassidus, and the different kelim are nigunim, and like I just discovered that one of our mezuzahs is the Alter Rebbe's ksav, and like whenever I see it, I just I love kissing it, especially. And there's Fabringans and learning and Tanya, and like they're each different vessels, they're kelim for for bringing it down. And then I thought, but like, what is the purpose of Chassidus? It's like, it's not to be, it's not just to have Chassidus. Like the actual ratzon is to come close to Hashem. And like, I have to be aware of that. Like sometimes it can be just that it's about Chassidus and all the kalim, but it's actually connecting to something very deep.
So I think that that's a beautiful example, is that, you know, getting to know Hashem, there are many different ways to do it. But if we get disconnected from our original ratzon, the thing that really motivates us, it can be hard to have the discipline to do all the things that we want to do, you know, the chitas and the learning and this, and, you know, even things that sometimes you don't feel the pleasure, but you want to have consistency in them. So then you have to, that's orech of das. That's being able to hold that. It's a good example. So we always have to try and remember what is our original ratzon, so that we can strengthen our das. Strengthen the ratzon, strengthen the das. And so going back to, you know, this text, it's hard sometimes to learn this. It's hard. It's not easy. But if you go back to what he said in the very first paragraph, that hisbonenus is what allows you to know Hashem, and that through the hisbonenus you'll come to understand that Hashem is one. So then there's some motivation to push through what can be uncomfortable. Okay, so basically now we've come to the end of the oimek of, you know, let's just do a quick roundup. So the oimek of das was that you are deeply connected to the thing, the, you know, whatever you're doing or whatever you're studying, and you have depth into it, like das into it. You're not going to be able to be easily distracted, and you're going to be able to spend a lot of time and forget about time and space, forget about yourself. That's oimek of das. Rochav of das is when you're able to tolerate the opposite perspective, and you can listen to what somebody else has to say, and you're not going to be moved from your position because you have das into it. You really know. Doesn't mean that you can't hear, if there's truth in what the other person says, that you can't hear the truth. You can hear the truth, but you can integrate that. But if they're coming and giving the opposite view, you know, saying, God forbid, you know, to keep Shabbat, or, you know, whatever it is that's really opposite to something that you deeply believe in, you can listen to them. It's not going to move you. You're not going to, God forbid, you know, consider giving up what you're very connected to. Then the orech of das is the ability to draw down what you really want into many different kalim, even ones that are secondary to the original ratzon and the original das. And then the way that you do it is through thought, speech, action. Those are kalim as well. Different ways of getting a lot of what it is that you want. So those are the three aspects of das. I just want to, you know, reiterate before we finish that what we have asked you to do, and really, really emphasize it, to create some kind of mind map of these first 9 paragraphs, because going forward, the second, you know, this chapter has 19 paragraphs. So we're paragraph 9. We're exactly halfway through. And in order to really understand the second half, we need to have the foundation of the first half. We need to really have access to it, to know it, not in all of its details, but we need to have the skeleton. We have to have a basic understanding of Chochmah, Bina, and Das, and the three different parts of Chochmah, Bina, and Das, and really know what it means. And the best way that I can suggest that is through some kind of mind map. Everybody will have a different way of doing it. You know, I showed you Miriam's mind map, which I thought was beautifully done, but it doesn't have to be the way that you do your mind map at all. Everybody has a different way of thinking. But I really showed it to you also just to give you inspiration, to be able to put onto a piece of paper something that you look at and you're reminded of, you know, where we've been, so that we now have a foundation and we can build on that. Okay, so basically that's it for this week. Anybody want to say anything? Add anything, any questions? Let's just have a look at the chat and see if there was anything that we need to answer. So Miriam mentioned something. She was saying, I'm going to try to identify the chapters from the Hebrew text, as it's another great way of ordering one's thought. The English version isn't quite divided up into chapters. Unfortunately, I don't know why they did this. For those of you working with the English, they didn't organize it the same way as the Hebrew, and the Hebrew is exceptionally well organized in terms of each paragraph is coherent. And Nechama says, I think spatial visualization, like the idea of the room, is very helpful to give concepts a concrete context. So that's another way to, you know, create a visual, is the idea of Moonwalking with Einstein, which is the book that describes a particular way of trying to remember things. Okay. So Miriam, to everyone, Das can be studied in relation to memory. The subconscious comes up as a trigger for the chush, both positive and negative. Example, addictions. Oh, and Gitti Stolik, I didn't read this. She was speaking about Das, and the example she gave is that she used to learn a mimer in one class with Rabbi Peltiel. Sometimes he took you on such a deep trip, you forget everything and immersed in profound, complex discussion. Okay, so that's a beautiful example of Das. All right.
Hello.
Yes.
Personally, it's more experiential. For example, right now, Baruch Hashem, we're working with shidduchim for my children, and for me, it's like, Tzipi, stay with it, try this, like just staying with it on all levels, in my prayer, in my thanking Hashem, in making phone calls, in talking to different people, but just like constantly, like this, what we're learning, trying to incorporate into my life, and just keep at it, stick to it, like in all your being, and God willing, we'll see. Agati u'matzati. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Tzipi, that's a beautiful example where you have such a deep ratzon to get your children married that you're trying in so many different ways, in prayer, in action, in, you know, that's Das right there. And we always see, you know, like when you really look at your Das, you'll see there's a ratzon behind it that's pushing it, that's feeding the Das, that then is going to go into Chochmah and Bina, like what to do, how to do it, why to do it. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else wants to add to the discussion?
And again, I have a question in the other direction completely.
Okay.
Is it when you see a da'at, when you see a connection to things that are not good? How do you handle that? By yourself or by somebody else? So there is a connection to something that is not good, which means, what does it mean? That there is a ratzon to something not good? How do you, and it's a strong connection, how do you handle it? This is a problem with a lot of people around that are maybe exposed to media and very, especially youth, very, very connected. How do you handle it? It's a question, not necessarily we have answers, but this is also da'at in the wrong direction.
Right. So you're right. If we talk about das as something neutral, it's just an experience, then you can get very deeply connected to things that are not good.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Now, look, I'm not an expert in addiction. I'll just say what comes up for me is very often that you will, if you can understand the root of what the person is getting from the addiction. So, for example, I recently heard, I can't remember who it was, who was talking about it. They were talking about, I think it was either Y.Y. Jacobson, Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, or maybe it was Chase Tao, who are both very involved in addiction. And Al-Khalea here is saying maybe there's a deeper rationale behind it. Yes, the root of the essential desire. So, you know, whoever the rabbi was, and I was thinking about this, I really want to find sometimes I listen to classes and I forget one thing from another, unfortunately. He was talking about the fact that we have a need to not be connected to our consciousness, like to escape our own consciousness. And he was describing it in the positive sense and also in the terms of addiction, that somebody who, when you drink, for that moment, you're drinking alcohol, for example, you forget about yourself. You don't have to deal with the pain of living. And so that becomes the addiction. And then he was describing in the terms of Kedusha what that means, like what is the pain of living and how there's actually a holy root in that. And so, somebody like those rabbis, they're trying to look for the root so that you can then give the person what they need from a holy place. So, for example, I'll take something not so difficult, but for example, why is it so addictive to watch, YouTube videos, even if it's something Kedusha, it doesn't matter. You're watching, say, YouTube shorts where people are saying things very short, but you can waste a lot of time on it. Time can go and you can see like, this is getting me nowhere really. It's just, some of the things are nice, but there's nothing there really. So first of all, the visual is very strong. And second of all, you also forget yourself. You don't have to deal with yourself. And there's certain things that happen in the brain, like the release of serotonin, for example. Like there's a certain pleasure that you get from certain activities that you might just say, I'm not talking about something so negative, but you might say, it's a habit that's wasting my time. So then you can look at, okay, I'm getting a certain pleasure from it. where can I get that pleasure from something that's more productive, that afterwards I feel like, wow, that, I really feel good, as opposed to I don't feel good. So I guess what I'm suggesting, without, too much, is to understand the root of the ratzon there, like what is being fed that the person needs, not just to, so that's to look at the root of it, rather than to just say, it's disgusting, it's terrible, and you can't overcome it because it's an addiction. But if you look at the root of what that person is getting, then you can substitute it in a kosher way. And not to say that it's easy. We all addicted to various things. We're addicted to our thought processes. Like we were saying earlier, the thought process then impacts the entire body. I was listening, I'm going to stop the recording at this point so I can speak more off the cuff. I think I should have done that right there.